Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Competitive Enablement Show on the Compete Network, powered by Klue, the podcast for product marketers and Compete pros looking to give their companies a competitive advantage. I'm your host, Adam McQueen, and today is a very special episode because I'm joined in studio. Go on.
I'm coming.
With producer Ben.
I'm here. Hi. Hey, Adam. Hey, buddy.
Hey, Ben.
Thanks for having me.
This is a farewell episode. Producer Ben has been with the podcast from nearly the start. Maybe 80, 85-ish episodes of the 95, 96-ish that have gone out.
That's about right. That sounds about right.
He's seen, heard, edited a lot of my audio, unfortunately, a lot of my conversations. He's been a part of a lot of conversations, and so we thought it would be a great way to end our time together with a little sharing of memories on the podcast.
It's too bad we forgot the mic stands, though. Now we're going to be just
holding mics. We're going to break the fourth wall here, too. If you haven't consumed any video content that Klue's done, you need to watch this one episode. If you're listening to the podcast, if you've never, ever seen any of the great videos, ads, everything we've done, go watch this interview. Grayson is behind the camera right now. He is the video guy. He's actually, his eye is tweaking out at how ugly the frame is, but we thought we'd give it to you raw, give it to you real, behind the scenes of what happens on the podcast, and this is arguably the best shot video I think we've done during Grayson's time here,
kind of
too.
the podcast in a nutshell when you think about it. Scrappy, good enough, kind of funny, kind of charming, kind of not. I mean, it's what more do you want?
At this point, I don't know what mic to be speaking into. We've got 3 or 4. Let's get into it. Let's share some memories, Ben. We like to kick the podcast off with 3 tactical lessons, but I want 3 things that you learned from the podcast. Maybe it's tactical. Maybe it's just you hate the way I say I roll my R's. I don't know. Yeah. Give me 3.
Okay, so the first thing, and it's something that I'll bring into my new role, is the importance of stakeholder relations. That was something I never paid too much mind to before, but it came up time and time again on the show, how important it is to talk to people, to learn what their jobs are, to learn what their pain points are, to understand their points of view. That's huge, and that's something I'll take into my next role. So stakeholder relations, number 1. Number 2, I've never, ever in my life heard someone pop their peas as much as you do. It is crazy. And we did order a screen for the microphone that's supposed to sort of lessen the popping of the peas, and that's gone missing somehow. So I don't know where that is, but that's gone.
I don't want my peas filtered. I want them raw and uncensored.
And then the third thing, I think the sort of tactical versus strategic approach, that's a framework that I'm going to be using, I think, moving forward. Balancing the two between what can my people use now, what can we use now, what can we put into action now, versus the right amount of sort of high-level thinking about the strategy of it all. So that was an interesting nuance that came up a lot on the pod. So yeah, I'd say those are the 3.
I just want to defend the peas. That's the only thing. I tuned out everything else Ben said there and just thought about the peas. My peas, I've been known to mumble. And since being on a podcast, I've had to really think about enunciating. And people assume I have a lisp. I don't have maybe I do have a lisp, but it's just more of like a really, really, really diluted English accent. It's really Canadian. I'm just trying to hold on to that. Well, on that note, what's your favorite memory of the podcast? Maybe you have multiple, or there's at least one good thing that came out of your time producing the show, right?
Yeah, so you know how much I loved the Versus series that we did. And it was somewhat early on in my tenure at Klue, so I wasn't sure exactly how honest I could be. And we were talking about Netflix versus HBO, and we were acknowledging that Netflix really takes the cake when it comes to reality TV. And at that time, Love is Blind Season 2 was out. And I mentioned that I like Love is Blind, and you asked me who my favorite character was. And that was probably one of the most dangerous questions a boss could ask you, because what do I give? Do I give the answer that the true answer, which I gave, was like kind of the greasy guy. You know, he was my favorite. Should I have given a little bit more of a polished answer? I don't know. But that was my favorite moment because, I mean, you really caught me off guard and I had to come up with something. And you know what? I was honest and it worked out.
This is a microcosm of maybe working relationship with Ben. Is he went really deep on that question when really I was just like, I probably didn't even know any of the characters. I sit on reality shows where my girlfriend watches. I don't know any of their names. I give them my own names. And Ben assumed that I was like psychoanalyzing his character as a new employee by asking him, "Who are you on Love Is Blind?"
It's true though. Like, sorry, I don't hope they can pick it up, but like,
here, one sec.
depending on who you like, you know,
It tells a lot
it is
about you.
indicative.
It tells a lot about you.
Is it who you're rooting for or who you identify with?
It's. I would have psychoanalyzed too. To be honest.
I mean, the 3 or 4 verses episodes we did were some of my favorite in the inaugural.
That was fun.
Those are some of the first episodes we did together as a tandem when we really invested in it. And for listeners or folks that weren't tuning in way back then, with Ben's departure, go read and listen to one of the best pieces of content I think he put together, which was a history of HBO, the history of Netflix, and how they're competing with one another, and his prediction for the future. What else we got? Oh, do you have any other favorite moments, or do you want to get to funny moments, or maybe they're in between?
Well, I think my favorite memory was when I got to host the show and interview Professor John Horn about his book, Inside the Competitor's Mindset. We make fun of Adam a lot for we accuse him of having a big ego and being very proud to be the host of the show and having his face everywhere, but it really like couldn't be further from the truth. There's not a lot of ego with this guy. And so when I went to him after the pre-interview, I said, hey, I need to do this interview. Like, I connect well with this guy. I know this guy. Can I host it? And Adam said, sure, do it. And that was probably one of the highlights in my professional career, to be honest, was doing that interview. Really good episode. That's probably my favorite moment on the pod. And you weren't even there.
I know. First and last time we got a professor on too. I think the one time we get a professor, you're like, I think I need to host.
Dude, we get people pitching us with guests. We get, look, I don't want to brag, but I'm going to brag a little bit. We get PR people reaching out to us saying, my client would be a good guest on your show.
Hey,
like,
that's how you know you made it.
we've
That's
arrived,
your favorite
baby.
moment is being able to reject guests.
My favorite moment, Michael, you might need to edit this part out. My favorite moments of the pod are when I'm on dates and I get to go, I produce podcasts.
And they look at you like, oh, what? What? That's your you go. How quickly into a date do you mention that you produce?
Immediately. This is my name, and then this is what I do.
Give me some funny moments. What are some of, there's been many behind the scenes, a lot of things that got edited out and stuff that stayed on air, and maybe even some chaotic moments of how we create this podcast. We went to Minneapolis and shot live at a conference, and then Grayson and I found on the surface was a beautiful Airbnb. It was a great place to shoot. Once you looked under the fingernails a bit more, there was some dirt, but we've done a lot of chaotic things to produce a podcast.
I think when you had to restart the interview with Chris Agnoli, and seeing the sheer look of panic on your face, but also being a pro about it and sort of trying to like muddle through, he would say something and you would kind of look up and react to it, and then you'd realize that the recording wasn't working, so you'd look down again.
Well, wait, where were you on that? Because you're the producer. I was on the podcast and I realized you'd given like a 3-minute incredible answer about how competitive enablement differs from competitive intelligence the old way compared to the new way. And then I look up 90 seconds through and it's not recording because my producer's probably sleeping at the wheel. And yeah,
I have no comment. Like, I have no comment.
I remember that I was actually I recorded that one at my girlfriend's parents' home too, and I was like on this really like awkward laptop. I'd made like the most ridiculous setup for that podcast, and just like I didn't have 2 monitors either, so I'm like trying to like look at it while looking at the camera. He's like in the top little left corner. This was the early days of the podcast.
There were a couple episodes at the beginning when you had the free version of Zoom. And so you only get 45 minutes. So we'd have to say, sorry, guests who have spent your time coming to talk with us. We're going to need to stop this. You're going to need to leave the room and come back in to finish.
But they came back on, they loved it. And then we were like, you know what? That's probably why we started cutting the podcast down to 30 minutes, is we didn't have the pro license to go beyond. It wasn't for any like editorial or content reasons.
Our guests have been so awesome, like so chill, like no high maintenance stuff. Every once in a while we'll get a guest who says, I need to let my legal team take a look at this recording, but that's like the exception. And even when they do that, it's a quick turnaround. So like, really, it's worth mentioning over and over again how much we appreciate you all coming on and spending your time to talk with us. It gives us so much value, gives our listeners so much value.
Shout out to the guests.
Shout out to the guests, because you are what makes it.
Do you have a favorite title you've made?
Oh,
favorite title. I don't know if this audio is
Grayson. You know what it is?
Heckling, by
it's
the way.
It's when so before I started, you wrote what was sort of the precursor to the Versus series. You did a little deep dive into Beyond Meat versus Impossible, the Impossible Burger. And then we did sort of a follow-up to it when I was around. And I believe the title of that podcast is it impossible to move beyond the meat industry? So, look.
Don't actually drop them out. I was going to do a metaphor.
You asked.
That was a good title. It was good content too. Maybe it was truly. I had a question, but then I exited it out because I don't want us to compare guests. I was gonna say, do you have a Mount Rushmore of guests? And I don't want to make you rank them, but maybe were there moments or pieces of conversations from specific guests, maybe a couple of our regular friends of the show, that stick with you most?
Off the top of my head, Jen Roberts is always such a good chat. Jen Roberts from Service Titan. We had a really, really interesting conversation with Molly Gallagher-Bodie, all about how Compete can support product launches, because we identified that was kind of a gap in our podcast programming. There was nothing about how to support products, so I know that was really great. What else? I mean, the live at Skip, the live-ish at Skip series, I think the way we captured the audio for that was really fun. We really made people feel like they were there. We captured that energy. I loved when we had Jason Smith and Chris Hartfigson on.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
I tell you what, we had Jason and Chris, the CEO at Dooley, and our own CEO. So we've got two founders and CEOs at high growth startups. I tell you what, CEOs, there's a lot more bells and whistles that go into that production. Do you remember how long that took us to set up the audio?
A long time.
Jason, I hope you're listening to this. I think a diva on that one, to be honest. There was audio stuff happening. There was noise in the background. It took us 30 minutes to even start recording.
I think one thing I've noticed when you're interviewing senior leaders, they have enough disposable income to have renovations going on at their house. And therefore, there's a lot of clanking and drilling that we have to contend with. So, I mean, it's all part of the gig, but...
That was one of my favorite moments actually on the podcast, was just getting to listen. I don't even remember talking in that one. I think I just let them go back and forth for 20 minutes. Go check that one out.
I mean, I've told both of you this, but the fact that I got to sit and listen and get paid for it, to be the producer of this podcast, has just like... It exponentially sped up my learning. So thank you for letting me be a part of this show, because it's been super invaluable. It's been great, and made a lot of great connections. And I'm really proud of the work we do. Frankly, like, it's a good show. We take the time. It's easy to just do some rinky-dink podcasts. It's easy to just like talk in front of a microphone and
we're doing literally
like we're doing right now.
My notes for this is I sent it to Ben 5 minutes before recording.
One of my sidebar here, one of my favorite moments was, I believe it was Pat Wall, the second interview with Pat Wall, when you had just moved into your new home.
Yep.
And the scene you were painting me was, the telephone guy was knocking at the door, and your toilet was overflowing, and your dog was freaking out, and your landlord was freaking out. And literally 1 minute before, you're like, I don't think I can do this interview. And I said, well, Adam, I don't think we're going to cancel on him with 1 minute
Shout
to
out
spare.
Pat Wall.
So I
Shout
just,
out Pat, friend of the podcast.
so I stepped up and did it, which is just the kind of relationship we have, you know?
Is that symbiotic? I don't remember in grade 7 science. That was not symbiotic, that relationship there.
Or am I the shark and you're the little fish cleaning me? Or are you, maybe we do both?
We're cleaning each other.
Look, in true producer fashion, we have to wrap this up because I have my exit interview in 7 minutes ago. So do you have one last question for me?
Well, no, I was going to say as well to folks, like what's going to happen next with the podcast? Well, it's TBD. We're going to have AMAs in the community, in the Compete Network community, with some Compete Pros every month. So that will still be dropping on the podcast feed. And we've got a couple more in the bank that are coming out. But we're going to just, you know what? Take a moment, take a breath. We've made 90 something of these. There's a lot of content, a lot of meat in the bone that we can still share with the audience. And we'll make a decision on what we want to do with the podcast. But I just wanted to thank you, Ben. This has been one of my favorite parts of my job ever, having you part of the team as a contractor at first that just through hook or by crook, you found your way fully into the team and somehow finessed his gig to be the producer of this podcast, which is, as he mentioned, one of the best gigs in the game. He's always filled in on all of the things that needed to get done. He's like always looked to elevate the show, and he's always had this like calm demeanor, and that's what's made him producer Ben. So I appreciate you so much on this podcast, man. And are we gonna do like a handshake?
Nice, dude. Perfect. Yeah. Thank you, man. I'm gonna miss you guys. Love you guys. Listeners, keep listening. And yeah, I'll catch you all soon.
And how do we wrap it again? We'll catch you all next week, maybe. I don't know. All right. Boom.